I'd like you to think back to the very first time you flew on an airplane. I'd like you to remember that feeling of excitement as you boarded the aircraft and you settled into your window seat. I want you to remember that feeling of anticipation as the airplane taxied out onto the runway. Okay? I want you to remember that feeling of exhilaration as the engines roared and your back got pressed against the seat and you experienced takeoff for the very first time. Then the feelings of awe and amazement as you looked out your window and everything seemed so small and so very far, far away. Well, these are emotions that I experience every day from the ground. And today we'll be flying beyond boundaries as we drone for life in the atmosphere. Now, I'd like to start and ask everyone to take a very deep breath with me, okay? We're gonna do this together on the count of 3. 3, 2, 1, take that deep breath. Hold it, 3, 2, 1, let it out. Well, congratulations, you've just inhaled thousands of microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, viruses, and I'm interested in the flow of these microorganisms in the atmosphere. And this is a field of study known as aerobiology. Because these microorganisms are small, they're able to be transported over great distances in atmospheric currents, across counties, states, countries, and even continents. Now, some of these microorganisms are important pathogens of plants, animals, and people. And if we can understand their atmospheric transport, then perhaps we can predict outbreaks of disease. Now, my research is really motivated by a series of big questions. First, are microorganisms transported over long distances in the atmosphere? Second, can we track their atmospheric movement? And are potential invaders flying into new territories? Now, to help answer these questions, we've developed drones. These are unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, to study microbial life in the atmosphere. Now, these drones are equipped with a smart brain, an autopilot that allows them to fly on their own without any human intervention. This autopilot is about the size of your cell phone. Now, our drones are equipped also with a series of sampling devices, which enable us to, of course, collect microorganisms during flight. One of these sampling devices operates like a clamshell, and of course, we can switch it on by remote control from the ground. The sampling device is closed during takeoff and during landing, and once we've reached the altitude that we want to sample at, of course, we can flip that switch. The sampler will open and will collect microorganisms during flight. Now, the video that you see here is, of course, taken on board one of our drones during a sampling mission at Virginia Tech's Kentland Farm, which is only about 15 minutes from where we're sitting right here in Blacksburg, Virginia. And of course, you can appreciate the beautiful topography of the farm setting. You'll see a little runway right there. There's, of course, our target for landing. Now, once we've landed the aircraft, we can, of course, remove the samples that we've collected. We can analyze them on site at our research site there at the farm, or we can take them back to the laboratory for analysis. Okay? Now, there are a number of advantages to drones. First of all, we don't have to worry about our pilots getting tired. That's because these planes fly by themselves. They can also maintain very accurate sampling paths, so we can tell them where to go, and they fly there. They can also hold precise altitudes during flight. So the airplane can take off, the samplers can open here at time point A, fly a very steady altitude, and then, of course, close those samplers and then land. And finally, because we've got these autonomous systems, technologies on board, we can coordinate vehicles such that they can do very complicated tasks together. This work here is in collaboration with my colleague, Dr. Craig Woolsey. In this video, you'll see two drones actually coordinating with one another, all on their own without any human intervention, such that they're flying directly on top of one another, speeding up and slowing down, such that they can enter, sample, and exit a spore plume at the very same time, really improving the precision and accuracy of this sampling mission. And you can see those aircraft doing that just right there. Of course, after we've collected our sample, we then come in for a landing. Now, the landing that you see here was actually part of our humble beginnings at Virginia Tech's Kentland Farm, where we were taking off and landing, of course, on some really nice, soft turf. Since then, our study site has expanded to a really nice shared research laboratory known as the Kentland Experimental Aerial Systems Lab, or KEYS Lab, which has a paved airstrip and also a beautiful research and teaching building. And that's just 15 minutes from right where we're sitting right now. So we've got our study side in place now to talk about those microorganisms, those high-flying fungi called Fusarium. This is an important group of fungi, a group that's very near and dear to my heart. In fact, members of Fusarium cause important wilts, rots, blights, cankers, and even skin and eye infections in humans. Okay? Some members of this genus Fusarium also produce some really nasty toxins that contaminate food and feed. These are called mycotoxins, and one of them is commonly called vomitoxin because of the symptoms that result from domestic animals consuming tainted feed. Now, Fusarium produces some really interesting spores. They're small, they're microscopic, but they're shaped like little boomerangs. And as it turns out, they're pretty good. They do a pretty good job of flying over great distances in the atmosphere. Okay. Now, as we've already talked about, the atmosphere is teeming with microbial life. It's really a haystack of microbes up there. And so we've needed a tool to find Fusarium in that haystack. So in my laboratory, we developed a selective medium. This is really just a little jello with a cocktail of antibiotics and fungicides that allow us to collect and analyze only Fusarium from our atmospheric samples, so we can bias our collections. Here is one of those sampling plates, and this is from one of our high-altitude sampling missions. And each of those white little fuzzy colonies that you see was where a Fusarium spore basically impacted that plate and then grew out. Then, of course, in a laboratory, we can transfer these colonies, and we can see them in all of their glory. Beautiful colors, different shapes and forms. And of course, once we have that collection on hand, we can ask all sorts of interesting questions, because now we can work with these microorganisms that we've collected from the lower atmosphere. One of my former students asked the question, well, can these high-flying Fusaria actually cause plant diseases? So she took a collection of Fusarium that we had actually collected 40 to 300 meters above the ground here at Virginia Tech's Kentland Farm. And she asked the question, can these microorganisms actually cause plant disease? So she set up a study to test this. She actually grew out some wheat plants, a susceptible variety of wheat, and she tried to make them sick. The good news for us, she succeeded. In fact, all of those strains that she tested were able to cause disease in wheat. And the symptoms you can see here on the two wheat spikes on the left show symptoms of Fusarium head blight, which is a devastating disease of wheat, particularly here in the state of Virginia, compared, of course, to the control spike on the right. She further looked at the mycotoxins that these fungi produced, and she found that all of them also produced mycotoxins. And in particular, there was this one oddball strain that produced a very rare mycotoxin that hadn't actually been reported from the state of Virginia before. So we had an oddball in the mix that we had collected with our unmanned aircraft, our drones. So we had a series of new questions. Where do these high-flying fungi come from anyway? And are they among the alien invaders from far, far away? Enter my colleague, Dr. Shane Ross. Shane did some really nice work on the celestial superhighway, all right? Space travel along these gravitational corridors connecting Lagrange points. I got together with Shane. I said, hey, Shane, man, this is some cool stuff. Is there any way we can bring this down to Earth? And Shane said, well, yeah. You see, there are these things called Lagrangian coherent structures, or LCSs, okay? These are coherent structures that move with a fluid. We can see them in hurricanes, tornadoes, wingtip vortices. These are coherent structures, boundaries between air masses, separating two very different dynamical systems. And as it turns out, these LCSs occur in our oceans. And these birds, these large predatory birds, actually track these LCSs so that they can feed deep out in the ocean. Well, Shane got to work. He actually took these wind fields from NOAA, and he started to model these LCSs across the surface of the Earth. And here you can see these LCSs as atmospheric waves here moving across North America. Our interest is, of course, how these microorganisms might be associated with these LCSs or atmospheric waves. So we got to collecting samples with our drones on both sides of these LCSs. One side, of course, being in the blue, as you can see, the other side being in the orange, the LCS being in this wireframe in the middle. And we compared these populations on both sides of the LCSs. Okay? We went back to these collections that were associated with that wheat experiment that I mentioned. And we had that really rare strain, a rare strain that we hadn't ever seen in Virginia before. This strain produced a mycotoxin called nuvalinol. And as it turns out, this strain was part of a population that was actually sandwiched between two of these LCSs. Okay? So this led us to hypothesize that these high-flying fungi were actually surfing on these atmospheric waves, much like surfers ride waves in the ocean to the shore. As it turns out, we believe there's a whole lot of surfing going on in the atmosphere. And these microorganisms are reaching new heights as they ride these monster waves, these mavericks, from one location to another. Now, we're actually extending this work to weather. Okay? As it turns out, some microorganisms are meteorologists. That's right. The weather reports that you get every morning that you look at and you decide, well, am I going to wear my coat? Am I going to wear my flip-flops? Those, in fact, can be manipulated, modulated by microorganisms. Now, we're interested in these microorganisms, particularly those that are associated with rain, with snow, and even hail, and we've developed a new all-weather platform that enables us to chase after these microorganisms associated with weather. You see, we've got a lot to learn about microbial life in the atmosphere. A lot to learn. These drones, they can help us. They can do things for us, with us. These are scientific vehicles of discovery. Who's up there? What are they doing there? Where are they going? Where are they coming from? And how are these microorganisms interacting with plants, with animals, and with us? It's really a great time to be an atmospheric explorer. Think about it. Each flight, a new expedition, a new adventure, a new journey, and a new discovery. The sky is the limit. Now, the next time you're riding on an airplane, I want you to look out the window with a new, refined awe and amazement. I want you to look out and think about all those microorganisms that are surfing right alongside the airplane. Okay? And I want to talk about one other emotion. Fear. As that aircraft begins its descent in preparation for landing, I want you to ask yourself this question. What would landing be like if the cockpit were empty? No pilots on board, much like the drones that we use for science. Thank you.